The lights above me flickered in that sterile, indifferent way only hospitals could master, bathing my half-conscious world in a cold glow that made everything feel unreal, like I was stuck somewhere between a dream and a nightmare. The rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor tethered me to reality, pulsing faintly in my ears like a mechanical heartbeat, reminding me I was still here, still breathing, still alive, though barely. My throat was raw, dry as paper, and I could feel the residue of anesthesia still fogging my brain, my limbs refusing to move no matter how much I willed them to. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and death, a bitter cocktail that clung to my skin as though the room itself were mourning something already lost. I heard the sound of voices before I could open my eyes. Voices too familiar to be mistaken, too sharp to be comforting. There was my sister Ava, her voice laced with that same impatient righteousness she had sharpened like a blade over the years, slicing through every family gathering with her holier-than-thou presence. Next came my brother, Martin, always quieter, more calculating, but with that clipped tone of resentment he reserved for any conversation that didn't benefit him directly. And then, most bitterly of all, my daughter, Claire, my only child, whose voice I hadn't heard in nearly 3 years, not since that awful December night when she slammed the door behind her and didn't look back. At first I thought I was dreaming, that my brain was playing cruel tricks on me while my body floated somewhere just outside consciousness. But then I heard it, the word that jolted my heart into a sudden, defiant beat. Will. "She's not dead yet," Martin hissed, but his voice wasn't grieving. It was exasperated, inconvenienced. "She might as well be," Ava snapped, the sound of a chair dragging across the linoleum floor marking her dramatic flourish. "They said the surgery was risky. We all knew that." "She survived," Claire's voice chimed in then, low and tense, like she didn't quite believe it herself, or didn't want to. "They said she made it through, didn't they?" "She's unconscious, Claire," Ava replied sharply. "Do you really think she's going to bounce back from a triple bypass at her age? At my age, like I wasn't even in the room, like I hadn't spent 71 years fighting tooth and nail for everything they now circled like vultures. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was still here, that I could hear every venom-dipped word, but my body refused me. So I listened, watched from the prison of my own silence as they began picking at the threads of my life, trying to unravel it while it was still wrapped around me. "I'm just saying," Martin continued, "if something does happen, we need to make sure things are handled properly. That house isn't going to manage itself." "Meaning you want it?" Ava said, her laugh bitter and short. "Of course. Because your rental property empire isn't enough. You've always had a thing for Mom's house, haven't you?" "It's a family home," he shot back. "Unlike you, I actually have the means to take care of it." "Right. Because money makes you a better son?" Claire said nothing for a while, and then her voice came quieter. "What about her paintings?" The air in the room shifted then, a silence that dripped with the weight of things unsaid. "She wouldn't want those just sold off," Claire added quickly, her voice uncertain now. "They mattered to her. She said they were like memories she could hang on walls." Ava sighed. "Claire, be reasonable. Nobody is going to toss her memories in the trash. We're just making sure things don't turn into chaos." "Too late for that," Claire muttered. And still, no one mentioned me. Not the me who was alive, breathing, and lying less than 5 feet away from them. Only the idea of me, the looming shadow of a fading woman, a name on legal papers they couldn't wait to get their hands on. Tears pooled in my eyes, hot and shameful, not because I was hurt by their greed, though that stung deeper than any surgical scar ever could, but because I had raised them, I had built them, fed them, held them during fevers and heartbreaks, watched over them like a lighthouse in storm after storm. And now they circled like sharks. There was a scraping sound, a drawer opening, and then the unmistakable sound of papers rustling. "She changed it last year," Ava said casually. You know that, right? After the fall, that's when she made me executor." "Executor?" Claire echoed, startled. "Since when?" "I was the one taking care of her," Ava replied sharply. "Not you. You couldn't even be bothered to show up for Christmas." "I didn't know if I was welcome," Claire whispered, the words laced with old wounds. "She's your mother," Martin snapped. And just like that, they were no longer fighting over me. They were fighting through me. Every unsaid accusation, every unresolved hurt. They used me like a battlefield, a name on a document they could throw like grenades at each other. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. But most of all, I wanted to remember how I had loved them, so I could find the strength not to hate them. Outside, the sun was rising behind the fogged window, pale and merciless. I closed my eyes. Again, not out of sleep, but because it hurt too much to watch them anymore. And in the sterile hush of machines and murmured betrayals, I made a vow. If I lived through this, truly lived, things were going to change. But first, I had to get out of this bed. First, I had to be seen. The room was still pulsing with that soft, sterile light when the nurse entered, her shoes squeaking gently against the floor like an unwanted interruption to a stage play that wasn't meant for outsiders. She glanced at the monitor, at my vitals, at the dull rhythm of the beeping that tethered me to her world. Then to me, her eyes pausing just long enough to notice the tear sliding from the corner of my eye. But she said nothing. She didn't ask. She adjusted the IV, noted something on her clipboard, and walked out again as quickly as she had arrived, leaving my family to continue disassembling my legacy like it was a jigsaw puzzle they wanted to finish before I flatlined. "Why didn't anyone tell me she changed the will?" Claire asked again, her voice now more shaken than sharp, the old fractures of our mother-daughter bond shimmering like cracks in a stained glass window. Ava scoffed. "Because you made yourself a stranger. You stopped showing up. You stopped calling. What did you expect?" "I expected someone to tell me if my mother almost died," Claire snapped. And I felt it then, that moment of guilt bloom in her voice, like something she had tried to bury but hadn't quite managed. "She told me not to," Martin said, suddenly, and his words dropped into the room like lead. "She made me promise not to call you." Claire turned on him, and I could almost hear her stare. "Why?" He hesitated. "She said it would hurt too much to hear your voice when she didn't know if you'd still hang up on her." My heart clenched at that, a dull throb of pain that wasn't physical, but cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had said that. I had meant it. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from hoping someone will come back, but fearing they'll leave even faster once they do. Claire went silent again. They all did. For a moment, the only sound was the mechanical breath of machines, keeping time in a space where time had started to twist and tangle. Then Ava spoke again, her voice brittle. "It's not about the paintings or the house or the damn car. It's about the fact that she didn't trust any of us enough to say what she really wanted. And now we're sitting here like grave robbers," Martin muttered. "She's not dead," Claire said, more to herself than to them. "She's not." I screamed in my mind. I screamed. The tear sliding down my face had turned cold against my skin, forgotten, ignored. They were so busy fighting over my memory, they hadn't realized it was still warm. Claire stood then. At least I thought she did from the sound of the chair legs scraping, and walked to my bedside. The room went quiet, as though they were afraid to break the spell. "Mom?" Her hand was cold when it touched mine, careful, almost reverent, as if she feared even that small touch might shatter something delicate between us. I wanted to squeeze her fingers. I wanted to open my eyes and look at her, really look at her. The little girl who used to braid dandelions into my hair and call me a queen. The teenager who slammed doors when she didn't understand my silence. The woman who walked out the door and forgot to leave forgiveness behind. "Mom, if you can hear..." "Me?" Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." My body didn't move. My fingers didn't twitch. But something inside me cracked wide open. She wasn't talking to the version of me they all had painted over the years. The stoic matriarch, the cold disciplinarian, the lonely old woman they only visited on birthdays. She was talking to me, and somehow that made the pain of being unseen even sharper. Martin cleared his throat. "Look, I didn't come here to argue. I just wanted to make sure everything's handled. I have to be back in Chicago tomorrow." "Of course you do," Ava muttered. "The living always have somewhere more important to be than the dying." "God, do you even hear yourself?" Claire turned to them both, and her voice rose, trembling with the weight of so many years unsaid. "She's not even gone, and we're already acting like she's some burden we're trying to cross off a list." They were quiet. Finally. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory, heavy, like the truth had just laid itself across their shoulders and dared them to pretend it wasn't there. "I didn't come here to fight," Claire whispered again. "I came to see her, to see if I could see her one more time." "You did!" I screamed inside. "I'm right here!" But all I could do was listen as she wept beside me. I never realized how much power there was in stillness, in helplessness, how utterly cruel it is to be alive and unable to remind people of it. The door opened again, and a doctor entered this time, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the monitors with a clinical detachment that chilled me. "She's stable," he said simply. "Still unconscious, but there's activity. She could wake up any time now." Could, not would. He left after a few short sentences, after glancing at my family like they were names on a chart, not the bitter mess of memory and history they really were. And then Ava said something I will never forget. "Maybe it's better if she doesn't." Martin didn't argue. Claire didn't speak. And I broke. Not visibly, not audibly, but inside in that sacred space no one could reach, I broke into 1,000 pieces. They had already buried me in their minds. They had buried me beneath their expectations, their bitterness, their regrets. And now, I had to claw my way back, not just to wakefulness, but to existence, to being more than a name on a paper, to being more than a regret in their voices. And even though the darkness still weighed heavy behind my eyes, I began searching for light. Not the fluorescent kind, but the kind I used to carry inside me. The kind that would bring me back. Because I wasn't ready to die. Not like this. The third day after my surgery felt like drifting on an endless sea. Consciousness came and went in waves, each one heavier than the last, dragging me under before letting me gasp silently back to the surface. I wasn't sure if it was dawn or dusk outside the window now. The curtains remained half-closed, the glass too smudged to tell, and no one had thought to open them since I'd arrived. Time had become a soft, pulsing fog, and in it, I heard memories whisper louder than the voices of those who stood beside my bed. They came in flashes, me stirring soup on the stove while Claire painted in the living room, Ava holding her newborn daughter and laughing so loud it made the kitchen lights feel warmer, Martin trying to fix a leaky faucet with the wrong tools. But all the right intentions. I remembered it all. Every moment they had clearly forgotten or chosen to tuck away behind their adult armor now revealed itself to me in perfect detail. And yet none of it seemed to hold them together anymore. They didn't come together like a family. They came apart slowly, like fabric unraveling thread by thread, always tugging at the seams, unable to remember who had stitched it in the first place. That morning, if it was morning, Claire was there again. Her fingers were wound around the edge of her coffee cup like it held her together. She looked older than I remembered. Not aged in years, but in heaviness, the way life presses into a person when forgiveness hasn't quite found a home. "I used to think she didn't love me," she said quietly to no one in particular. "When I left, I thought maybe it wouldn't matter, that she'd forget I ever belonged here." Ava scoffed from the corner of the room. "You always needed someone to blame." "I needed someone to listen," Claire fired back, the edge of pain cracking her voice. "But all you two ever did was talk over me." Martin sighed, pacing now. "This is what always happens. We make it about us. We use her like a backdrop and forget she's not a stage." Those words struck me like lightning. He was right. I had become their backdrop, neutral, silent, constant, something they projected their wounds and wants onto. But I had never been silent, not really. They just stopped hearing me, and now I couldn't make them listen. Ava crossed her arms, her expression bitter. "Do any of you even know what she wanted?" They all fell silent. That silence said more than any of them could. Because they didn't know. They hadn't asked. They had built stories in their minds of who I was and never stopped to see if I still recognized the reflection. Claire approached me again and sat. I heard the rustling of paper. My will. I hated that sound now. That dry, crinkling shuffle of things meant for the dead. "She left the house to Ava," Claire said softly. "But she left me the paintings, and the letters, and the jewelry box." Martin raised a brow. "What letters?" Claire hesitated. "The ones she wrote after Dad died. I used to find her up at night with a pen and paper. I didn't think. She kept them." "She kept everything," Ava whispered, and for a moment I almost felt her soften. "I used to think she was heartless," Ava continued, surprising even herself. "But when I moved back in after my divorce, I saw it, the grief. It was everywhere. She just didn't want us to carry it too." Martin sat down across from her, his voice quiet now. "I didn't come to the funeral. I told everyone it was work, but I just couldn't watch her cry. And there it was, the truth. Not about my will or my money, but the version of me they had all been too afraid to meet, the vulnerable one, the hurting one, the woman behind the mother." "I read the letters," Claire whispered. "They weren't to us. They were to him. Every one of them started with, 'My love.'" My heart, so stubborn and bruised, fluttered painfully in my chest. They had found what I thought I'd hidden so well. They had opened the box I thought would be buried with me. Tears leaked from my eyes again, hot this time, not from shame or helplessness, but from being known. If I had had the strength to cry aloud, I would have. Claire's fingers brushed my hand again. "She's trying," she said, looking at Ava. "She's fighting." "You think she can hear us?" Martin asked. "I know she can," Claire said. And in that moment, I felt it. Something inside me shift, subtle but powerful, like a door creaking open after years of silence. I focused everything I had, every broken cell, every pulse of memory, every piece of the mother I still was, on that hand she held, and my finger moved, just once, but it moved. Claire gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. "She moved." Ava rushed forward. "What? Was it a twitch or—" "She moved," Claire repeated, stronger now, tears springing into her voice. "Mom, do it again. Please, if you're there, just try again." I did. With everything I had, I did. The smallest squeeze, the tiniest motion. But it was enough to part the veil. The room erupted, not with panic, but with something I hadn't felt from them in days. Hope. A nurse was called. A doctor followed. They began checking my vitals, calling my name, shining lights into my eyes. I tried to open them, tried so hard it felt like lifting a mountain with my lashes. And then, light. Blinding, golden light. The first real thing I saw was Claire's face, red-eyed, radiant, alive. "Mom?" I blinked. Once. Then again. A sob escaped her throat, and she crumpled to her knees beside me, holding my hand like it was a lifeline pulled from a storm. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here, Mom. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since I'd opened my eyes, I felt the room begin to breathe with me. They were no longer gathered to say goodbye. They were witnessing my return, and I had so much to say. The first words I spoke weren't grand or poetic. They cracked and crawled out of my throat like wounded things, raw from disuse, trembling on dry lips. "Water," I rasped, and Claire shot up like someone had lit her soul on fire. She held the straw to my mouth with shaking hands, tears pouring down her cheeks, whispering thank yous between every breath, like I had risen from the grave. The water was cold, mercifully cold, and as it touched my tongue, I felt more human than I had in days. Ava hovered near the foot of the bed, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes shining with something brittle and unfamiliar. Remorse, maybe, or wonder. Martin stood beside her, silent, no longer the businessman with schedules and obligations, but a son watching the woman who had taught him how to tie a shoe take her first sip of life again. "Don't fight," I whispered, my voice shredded but insistent. Their heads turned toward me like sunflowers to light. "Please," I said, the word cracking in two, heavier than the IVs and machines and bandages wrapped around me. Claire placed her hand on my arm, gently, like I was made of glass. "We won't. Not anymore." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the years had carved deep grooves in all of us, and it would take more than promises whispered at my bedside to fill them. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to pull strength from somewhere deeper than muscle or memory. When I opened them again, I looked at Ava. Her lips trembled before she spoke. "I didn't know how to help you. I tried to manage everything so I didn't have to feel it." "I know," I whispered. She took a breath that broke, halfway through. "I didn't mean to make you feel alone." "But I did," I said gently, not to wound her, but to lift the truth between us. She nodded, and a sob fell out of her mouth before she could catch it. Martin stepped forward, and to my amazement, took my other hand. "I was afraid," he said simply, "afraid of losing you. So I stayed away, like distance could protect me." I turned my head inch by inch to face him. "You're here now." He nodded, jaw tight, eyes wet. "I am." And then Claire, my daughter, the one I hadn't seen since our last bitter words, the one whose silence had carved the deepest wound into me. "I'm sorry," she said again, "for everything. I was angry for so long I forgot what I was angry about." I never stopped loving you, I said. She broke completely then, burying her head into my blankets, clutching my arm like it might dissolve into nothing if she let go. We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing, together, letting years of anger melt, quietly into the sterile air. Later that evening, after the doctors confirmed my mind was intact and my body was healing, the nurse wheeled in a cart with dinner I couldn't yet eat and paperwork I couldn't yet sign. But something was different. The air was warmer. The silence between my children was not quite silent. It was gentle, reverent, a stillness made from reflection rather than resentment. Martin opened the window. Ava adjusted the flowers beside my bed. Claire sat and began to read aloud from one of my old letters, her voice soft, shaking at first, then steadying as she reached the line I had written years ago. "If you find this after I'm gone, I hope it teaches you more about how much I stayed than how much I left." She looked up. "You never left," she whispered. I smiled. It was small, faint, but it hurt less than before. In the days that followed, things didn't magically transform. There were still old wounds, still clumsy apologies and awkward silences. But they began to come closer to each other, meal by meal, hour by hour. They asked questions, not about the will, but about me. What I wanted, what mattered. And I told them. I told them I didn't care who got the house or the car or the furniture. I told them what I really wanted was to be remembered fully. Not as the woman in the hospital bed or the signature on a legal document, but as the mother who held them all together in the quiet ways they had never noticed. I asked them not to mourn me with fighting when I was gone. I asked them to gather for birthdays, to share memories like wine, to keep each other from turning into strangers. I watched their faces shift, each of them carrying my words like something sacred. The next week, Claire brought the paintings home and hung them in my room. Ava brought old photo albums and we flipped through them together, laughing at clothes we'd all regretted and smiles we had once forgotten. Martin took care of my bills, but also planted flowers in my garden, ones I had loved in my youth but hadn't seen in decades. They stopped talking about the will. They started talking about me. And that, more than anything, brought me back to life. I wasn't just alive. I was seen. And when I slept now, it wasn't from exhaustion, but from peace. Because sometimes, we don't wake up to a new day. We wake up to a second chance, and I was holding mine with both hands.